Teamwork isn't just nice to have in business, it's the undisputed competitive advantage. When your team members work as a unified force, your whole operation benefits through higher productivity, thriving creativity, and unstoppable momentum. Welcome to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast, where we share with you strategies and tactics to help you develop game-changing teams so that you and your business can make a real difference in the world. I am so delighted to welcome you back to Impactful Teamwork. So today I want to talk about knowing your role in the herd, because it's so important within teams that we understand the contribution that we're making to the team. And I thought I'd start today with a quote from Andrew Carnegie. Teamwork is the ability to work together towards a common vision. It's the fuel that allows common people to attain uncommon results. And this is why I talk about teamwork as being the secret superpower that's available to all business leaders to unleash within the organization. Because in this era of relentless change, we've talked about being in this VUCA world. Business leaders are always seeking to get more from less. And what's the most effective way to do that? Well, that's by leveraging the resources of your team members and getting them to operate as a high performance team and being in what we call a peak performance state where they deliver the most impact. And we call this state flow. And this is where you are aligned and energized and work seems easy. And this is kind of your natural state. When you're doing what you love to do, this is when you're in flow. And this is one of the reasons why last year I actually trained to be an accredited high performance coach in order to help people to get into flow. Because flow is this natural state, but we do tend to avoid it and we don't get there as easily as we could do. And there are a few strategies and tactics that we can use in order to expedite this. But if we think about it simply, flow is the path of least resistance. And so what does that mean? It means that when team members are in flow, productivity rises, results increase, all these occurrences line up, and more importantly, team members have more fun and feel more connected to the organization. Flow is really a state in which the person or the team member is fully immersed in the activity. They're caught up in a feeling of energized focus and full involvement. And it's this focused motivation where the emotions are not just contained and channeled, but positively energized and aligned with the task at hand. And if your team members are feeling stressed or overwhelmed or anxious, that's a pretty good indication that they are out of flow. Because the opposite's true. When people are in flow, they feel joy or even rapture whilst performing the task, and they are fully engaged. And as business leaders, we want our team members to be fully engaged. And the other thing that often happens when we experience flow is that there can be this distortion of time. And it's when our internal clocks don't seem to match the external clock. And maybe you've experienced this, I know I have. But when I'm immersed in flow, I often look up and I think maybe only a few, minutes has passed. And actually, I can find that hours have already elapsed. So it's a funny thing when you're in flow. Sometimes it feels like time also really stands still. That's what it feels like. But of course, it doesn't. And in the workplace, we can see flow happening when an individual's challenges and skills are equally matched. So when we've got this equal match of skills and challenges, we create this harmonious environment. And so what we notice is when our team members are in flow, they have complete involvement in what they're doing. They're focused and concentrated. They sometimes have what I call this sense of ecstasy. It's a sense of being outside everyday reality. They also have this greater inner clarity. They know what needs to be done and they know how well they are doing. They know that the activity is doable and their skills are adequate for the task. And I think this is really important because sometimes we do try and overface people in the workplace and give them too much that's too far outside of their comfort zone. It's really important that we stretch people outside of their comfort zone, but we don't want them to take them into the place where they just shut down and they stop working. So we want to ensure people know the activity is doable and they've got the right skills to access to do it. There's also often a sense of serenity. There's no worries about yourself and a feeling of growing beyond the boundaries of the ego. When people are in flow, as I said, there's also this timelessness. Hours seem to pass by in minutes. And then finally, there's this intrinsic motivation because whatever produces flow becomes its own reward. So what I'm really interested in is that the flow experience is surprisingly consistent across activities, whether you think the activity is work or play. And the research on flow shows across a wide and diverse range of activities how positive the experience is for people because of this effortless concentration that brings enjoyment and satisfaction. So I feel that as business owners and business leaders, we all have a responsibility to try and get our team members into flow. And I think this is really important because when we get people into flow and people are in flow, their self-esteem grows. They feel in control of the situation. They feel happy, strong, active, involved, creative, free, excited, open, and clear. So there's certain conditions that we need to create to help get people into flow. And these are, there needs to be this high perceived challenge level. And that needs to be combined with a high perceived skill level. So we've got the challenge and the skill, and they need to be in kind of equal measures. So people don't feel massively out their comfort zone and they can't achieve something, but they get to the stretch zone. People need to know what they need to do, and they need to know how to do it. And they also need to know when they're doing well. They need a feedback loop to know that they're doing well. They also need freedom from distractions. And therefore, in order for all of that to happen, the flow activities also need to be aligned with our expertise. And I talk a lot about the importance of teams pulling together in the same direction and the importance of having a clear purpose and vision. And I think what's really important as well to recognize is that when we're in flow, we don't necessarily have to have in the full detail of the vision about where the business is going. But we do need to know what the next few steps are and how this is going to contribute to ultimately where the business is going. And let me share an analogy of how that might look. For example, if you went rock climbing, for example, you have to know where the next piece of rock is that you need to grab onto, where you need to put your next hand grip or foot grip in order to get up the mountain. But you don't need to know about the full path to get to the top. You just need to know what the next steps are and therefore what you need to do in that moment. Because concentration is essential. When we're in flow, we need to free ourselves from all the distractions that can interrupt our attention. And we live in a world where most of us, suffer from attention deficit disorder, where we aren't in the present moment paying attention. So it's really important that we also create conditions in the workplace where team members don't get distracted and have this opportunity to have this unfiltered time of concentration so that they can get on with what they're doing. And how might that look in the workplace? Well, that might be that we recognize and appreciate when somebody has effectively put their out of office on in order to do a piece of work. Maybe they've turned off all their notifications. They're just staying in the zone doing what they're doing, and they don't need distractions from outside. You might even want to do something if you're in an office environment. You might want to be wearing a set of headphones, for example, to mitigate the noise. I've seen people in the past put, a little flag or something on their desk so that people know when that flag's up, they're not to be disturbed. So it's really important that we find this uninterrupted space and time in order to work. And as I said, we need to keep getting feedback on how we're doing. Feedback is a key component of getting into flow. If we don't know how we're doing, we don't know how to adjust and recalibrate to move forward. So you get this feedback loop that goes between action and feedback, and we keep refining that so that we can make the activity worthwhile doing. And a kind of fun fact around this is that I love feedback loops are really embedded into nature, and nature continually uses feedback loops to help evolve and survive. And an example here is the white clover plant, because it uses feedback loops to fend off herbivores. And they chemically adjust their leaves when eaten by caterpillars, so they're harder to chew, which the caterpillar interprets as a signal to feast elsewhere. So the clover gets feedback, it changes it's the way it shows up in the world in order to avoid getting eaten more by the caterpillar so it can move forward. So we really need to think about how we can use these feedback loops to adapt our style strategically. And just quickly before I talk about people's roles in teams, I just really want to share with you an acronym that I love around teams. Because teams, the acronym stands for Together Everyone Achieves More. And I just believe that this is so true, and this is why teamwork is such a competitive advantage. And I often say that success is like a team sport. Because when you think about it, can you really recall a time in history when one act of genuine significance was achieved by just one person? Pretty much on all occasions, a team is involved. And President Lyndon Johnson once famously said, "There are no problems we cannot solve together, and very few we can solve by ourselves." So why is that? Why do we need the teamwork? What are the benefits of being in a team? So teams involve more people, and therefore we've got more resources in terms of time, energy, and ideas than we would have from one individual. So it gives this diversity of perspective that we've spoken about previously. It allows the leader to maximize their potential and minimize their weaknesses. And the teams provide multiple perspectives on how to reach the different goal, as everyone sees it from this different perspective. And this is what creates a creative flow of ideas, because the stumbling blocks that one person sees can easily be navigated by somebody else. And one thing I particularly value about teams is that we can share the credit for the victory and also take the blame for the losses. So there's some collective accountability here. And in my experience, this fosters genuine humility and authentic communication. But teams also are great because they keep leaders accountable for the goals. And it's quite simply that case of 1 + 1 = 3, because teams can simply do more than the individual. So why is it then that in business, time and time again, I come across business leaders who want to do things for themselves, and they don't want to involve the team? And this can be a big problem, particularly for entrepreneurs when they've set up their own business. They've been reliant on themselves for so long, then they start hiring team, but they're reluctant to give anything to their team members because they're afraid to give away their power and authority. So reasons that business leaders often try and do everything themselves is because of their ego. They don't like to admit they can't do everything. And an Andrew Carnegie quote that I think is really applicable here is that it marks a big step in your development when you can come to realize that other people can help you to do a better job than you can do alone. And I recall being in the corporate world, hiring some people into my team. And I had a couple of CVs from people that were really, really qualified. And I remember at the time thinking, oh my gosh, I can't hire them because they're too highly skilled. They make me look bad. And that was a massive limitation, a massive fault on my behalf, because hiring those people into my team would have actually elevated my own performance as well as that of the team. So it would have been really a good thing to do. Which leads to number 2 as to why people don't often delegate work to other people, is because of this insecurity. And that was definitely my case in that example. And it's because leaders can feel threatened by their team members. By failing to promote teamwork, the leader undermines their own potential and erodes the best efforts of the team with whom they work. And they do well to listen to the advice of former US President Woodrow Wilson, who said, "We should not only use all the brain we have, but all that we can borrow." And this is the value of having a team is, again, like I've talked about previously, the 1 + 1 = 3. Let's borrow other people's brilliance to make everything brilliant. The third reason why some people want to do everything themselves is naivety, underestimating the difficulty of achieving big things. And finally, the fourth reason could be to do with people's temperament, people's personality, because some people just don't naturally think about working with other people. They never consider enlisting the support of others. And this creates a big barrier to their success. And there's a huge amount of research that shows that people that work together achieve more as a result of working with others rather than against them. So this is the harsh reality, is that business success cannot be achieved alone. And often it's not that maybe the business owner or the business leader doesn't have great ideas or they don't know what to do. It's just that when we work in what I sometimes call the Lone Ranger situation, we've got nobody to bounce ideas off. We've got nobody there to motivate us. We've got nobody there to provide that feedback or to help offer accountability. And this is why then sometimes businesses falter and don't move forward, because we haven't got this in place. And if we take that example of the Lone Ranger, the Lone Ranger even had his faithful companion, the Native American Tonto, to support him on his journey. So business isn't about being a Lone Ranger sport. It is about us all working together effectively. So team dynamics, knowing your place in the herd. I think great leaders, I call these unbridled leaders, recognize that every team member has a role or a niche where they add the most impact and contribution to the team. But the challenge is that we often promote people to roles they're not suited with. And this can create dire consequences for the business. So having the right people in the right roles is essential to team success. And the dynamics of a team can change according to the placement of people. So let me just share this with you. So we have regression, and regression occurs when we have the wrong person in the wrong place. Frustration occurs when we have the wrong person in the right place. Confusion occurs when we have the right person in the wrong place. And progression happens when we have the right person in the right place. And then the fifth level that's possible is multiplication. It's about having the right people in the right place. So it doesn't matter what kind of team that you're working with, the principles are the same. All team members have a place where they add the most value. And when each person does the job that they're best for, everyone wins. And often the best team selection is not the person who can be the most effective, but the person who enables the existing team to become more effective. So here's an example. I used to be a massive rugby fan, and I used to watch it every weekend with my partner. And I remember back long time now in 2003, that's like 20 years ago, isn't it? I was a bit more in my youth then. Johnny Wilkinson was a bit of an idol and hero of mine, and he was the England fly half at the time. And he dropped an amazing drop goal in sort of the last minute of a game, which helped England win, I believe, the Rugby World Cup, if I'm correct. But if we think about that, sports is such a great analogy for us to use to think about having people in the right roles in the right places. Because Johnny Wilkinson was clearly an amazing fly half within the England rugby team. He was great at kicking. He was great at distributing the ball across the pitch. But what would have happened if instead Clive Woodward, the England coach at the time, instead of putting Johnny Wilkinson at fly half, had put him in the pack and maybe made him the hooker? So he would have been a classic example of the wrong person in the wrong role. And he wouldn't have been able to shine. And as a result, his personal morale would have dropped, and so would that have the team, because people wouldn't have been playing to their capability. And one of the challenges that we find in business is that so often we hire people into the wrong roles. And I was just talking with a good friend of mine earlier on, Danny, who runs the Teamer app. And Danny and I were talking about this fact that 70% of team members aren't happy in their jobs. Wow, what an amazing statistic that is. But when I reflect on it, I'm not really surprised, because I do see this all the time as hiring people into roles and people accepting roles knowing that it's not the best fit for them. It might be that the role requires the wrong skill set for them. It might be that they're not a good cultural fit for the company and they don't enjoy the environment that they're in. As leaders, we really don't spend time then figuring out what the best role for that person is. There's probably an opportunity to deploy that person to a different role within the organization. And if we're brave enough to do that, then that creates a win-win throughout the organization. The team member is happier. They start moving into a role where they're in flow. And it's a win-win for us as a business leader, because we've got somebody who's more engaged and more productive within the organization. So it's really important that as we grow the business, that we bring on board the right people that are a great energetic fit for the team. And we've got to trust these people that they're going to do a good job, but it takes time to nurture people and build relationships with them. And simply by, as I said, bringing in somebody who's got a great skill set doesn't mean that that's a recipe for success. And I certainly know in the corporate world, I hired somebody into my team who didn't actually prove to be a great fit. And actually, they were massively detrimental. And John Maxwell talks about the law of the bad apple, where just one person in your team can have a massive detrimental effect on everyone else. So there's lots of tools and resources that we can use to help us figure out which people should go in which roles within our team. And I will be getting some guest speakers in to come and talk to you about this and sharing my own experiences in some other podcasts. But for today, I think we've covered a lot about why we need the right people in the right roles in the team, the impact of that not happening, and more importantly, for your team members, getting people in the right roles where they're in flow is so, so valuable, both for your team members individually, but also for the business. And this is what creates the win-win. So my invitation to you would be to really look at the people in your team. Are they in the right roles? Maybe there's an opportunity to shift somebody's role, because I've seen cases where somebody that we had labeled as a bad employee wasn't a bad employee. They were just doing the wrong role. And when we changed them to a different role, we got a completely different result. So please have a think about that and think about how you might be able to look at the structure of your teams and what people are doing. And remember, the only way that you're really going to know what your team members want out of the roles is to start building great relationships with them and have some honest conversations with them about what they want out of the business, and then see how you can align everything together. So thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed talking with you about this topic, which is one that's really, really close to my heart, because it makes such a difference when people are doing jobs that they love. And yet the statistics show us that 30% of people really are the only ones that enjoy going to work, because 70% of people are unhappy in the workplace. So please go forth. Let's try and change this statistic by getting the right people in the right roles and helping people understand their value and contribution to a team. So until next week, have a great time, and I look forward to seeing you then. Okay, bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast. Please stay tuned for future episodes and do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on your favourite platform. Recommendations are essential for attracting new listeners. Please follow us on social media at Julia Felton and at Business Horsepower. And if there are any topics you'd like us to cover on future episodes, please do let me know. Remember, you and your team are always making an impact. What impact will you make today?